Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Welcome to episode number 85. Thank you all so much for joining us today as we take a look at a lot of fun things coming up. First of all, July. It's July, and July has been the month that I think we've all been circling on our calendars ever since we got a full glimpse at the entire 2025 slate. It's just been there for a while. I can't believe it. We've been talking about this for years, right? At this point, years, but Superman is coming. We're going to do a segment about my hopes and predictions for Superman. I just watched Jurassic World Rebirth. We're going to talk about that as well in the later segments of this podcast. Ironheart just wrapped up as well. A whole bunch of other news. Got to see the trailer for the Odyssey attached to Jurassic World Rebirth. So this is when we go. And we're barreling towards Comic-Con. We're going to have Jurassic World this week, Superman next week, I think a week off from big movies, and then Fantastic Four after that, and then Comic-Con after that. So it's going to be a wild ride as we head through July into August. So thank you so much for joining us. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers. If you could subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, it would mean so much to me. Thank you guys so much for those of you who are listening and watching on the YouTube channel. So close to 2,000. We are getting there. It has been such a fun ride to be really revitalizing this podcast since basically about a year ago, which has been really exciting. So thank you so much for that. Make sure to leave a like and comment down below with any of your thoughts on the topics that we discuss here. And if you're interested in the audio-only platforms, the audio-only version of the full podcast comes out a few days before the video version and the segments on Saturday mornings in the United States. And so if you want to check those out on Spotify, Overcast, and Apple Podcasts, make sure to do so there. The entire podcast in full is out there first. So that is if you want to check the entire thing out. Thank you guys so much again for listening, and let's dive into the topics for today. Alrighty, guys, we are today in this segment continuing our rewatch of the Defenders saga. And I say rewatch very loosely because for context, right, we've talked about this before. I've done videos on Daredevil Season 1, Daredevil Season 2, and Jessica Jones Season 1. But I have actually not seen the entire Defenders saga, rather. I have only seen Defenders, before this rewatch anyways, I keep getting those two mixed up, Daredevil Season 1, Daredevil Season 2, Daredevil Season 3, and The Defenders. Those were the only shows that I got all the way through in my initial watch, and this was many years ago, 5 or 6 years ago at this point. But then I decided, in honor of Daredevil Born Again, let's go back and watch Daredevil Season 1. Let's try to get through the entire, Daredevil canon and do a rewatch of Daredevil Born Again. And after I watched Season 1, I was like, well, let's give Jessica Jones another try. I watched the first episode a while ago, and it just didn't click for me then, but I decided to give it another go. And at that point, I was committed. I was like, let's just go for the whole thing. And as each passing day goes by, it is looking like a better and better decision, to be honestly, because first the news comes out that Jessica Jones is going to be in Daredevil Born Again Season 2 rather. So there you have that. That is making my decision to watch Jessica Jones Season 1 for the first time all the better, in my opinion. And then we have, Mike Coulter posting things about Luke Cage. So seems like, as we're going to talk about here with Luke Cage Season 1, seems like Luke Cage is going to maybe have a presence in Daredevil Born Again Season 2. And then lo and behold, Punisher, right? One of my favorite parts of Daredevil Season 2, but, I just never got around to seeing his own show. Punisher is going to be in Spider-Man Brand New Day. So it's like all these different things are coming together, and it just, I think it really is the ripe time, the ripest time, if you will, to do this Defender saga, I guess, first time watch. And so that's what we're doing here. We are revisiting, not me personally, but just, I guess collectively, we are revisiting the Defender saga many years later. So we did, like I said, Daredevil Season 1, we did Jessica Jones Season 1, we did Daredevil Season 2, and now we are on Luke Cage Season 1. Very quickly after this show, heading into the Defenders, we have Iron Fist Season 1, which I'm interested in. I've never seen Iron Fist. I've heard things. Obviously, I've heard some things about Iron Fist, but haven't personally seen it. So very curious to see how that'll go. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We'll hopefully talk about Iron Fist Season 1 in a couple weeks when I wrap that up. So let's talk about Luke Cage Season 1. Full spoilers ahead for the show. Let's revisit that season of television. So what did I know about Luke Cage Season 1 heading into this watch? Well, first of all, I knew that Mahershala Ali was in the show, which was funny because everyone, when he was cast as Blade, was like, oh my gosh, well, he was already kind of in the MCU. At that time, the Netflix shows were tangential to the MCU, which is interesting because, especially in this show, there are actually quite a few MCU connections in here. I mean, Hammer Tech is referred to a lot in this series, and obviously, Justin Hammer himself doesn't appear necessarily, but a lot of the technology, the guns, the weapons, the bullets, are Hammer Tech. So his presence is being felt. I think Iron Man is referenced a few times, and so in hindsight, these shows really do fit into the MCU, as long as you ignore the question, where were they the entire time of the Infinity Saga? But if you do, then it totally works out, and it totally makes sense. Anyways, all that aside, Luke Cage season 1, right? It came out right after, it's leading up to the Defenders, and Mahershala Ali is in the show. That's what I knew beforehand. And he was Cottonmouth in this show, and then he was going to be Blade. Now all that is kind of out the window. But that's about all I knew. I mean, I knew Luke Cage vaguely. I'd seen him in the Defenders, but he had unbreakable skin. That's about all I knew from him. I really didn't know a whole lot else. And then, we were introduced to him in Jessica Jones season 1, and I liked him enough, actually. I thought that he was one of the better side characters in that show. Personally, you can go check out my thoughts on Jessica Jones season 1. I wasn't a huge fan of that cast of characters, supporting characters, I should say. And even Jessica Jones herself, I mean, intentionally so, mostly, but not the most likable character in the world. And I think, again, that was part and parcel of just who the character is. But, I think Luke Cage was a bright spot. But he didn't have a whole lot to do. But I think his backstory with Reva in that show was pretty interesting. So we head into Luke Cage season 1. I was curious to see, were they going to pick up on any of those threads from Jessica Jones season 1? The answer is not really. Jessica Jones isn't mentioned so much at all. The only big connecting thread, I suppose, is Claire Temple, and even then, in Jessica Jones season 1, he really doesn't interact with Claire because he's knocked out, he's unconscious, and so, but Claire has obviously a big role to play, probably the biggest role to play in Luke Cage season 1 than any of the other shows, and I think that's, even given her pretty big supporting role in Daredevil, season 1 at the very least, and so, I think that's the biggest connective thread. And I do like Rosario Dawson. Not even, I wouldn't analogize her to being like Nick Fury, but I think insofar as she is appearing in every single show, I think that's a pretty fun connective tissue to have in this Netflix universe. But yeah, I mean, Luke Cage season 1. Here's what I'll say about it. I actually think I liked it better than Jessica Jones season 1. I'm not sure if I enjoyed it better than any of the Daredevil seasons thus far, but what I really enjoyed about Luke Cage season 1 was, first of all, I loved how rooted, and you guys have heard me talk about this before with other shows, like how I'm hoping, one of my hopes for Ironheart, we'll talk about Ironheart a little bit more in this podcast episode later, but if you went back to my hopes and predictions for Ironheart all the way back when, and I mean that, facetiously 2 weeks ago, one of the things that I was hoping for was for it to be rooted in Chicago, because I love when these shows take the time to explore different cities across the United States, different cultures, right? I loved, case in point, how Kamala Khan, the show Ms. Marvel explored Jersey City and explored her family, explored her Pakistani American roots, explored her community, her mosque, right? I love that kind of stuff, because it opens a world into a rich, just different cultures, rich cultures, and how how people live, and I think it's exciting. It's awesome, different traditions, families, and it's great. And I love how this show really took to heart Harlem. Harlem is really, I think, the most important part of the show, and I think that is amazing. I love that, and I think that is, to me, one of the greatest strengths, that they did not shy away from any of that. This show is Harlem. Right, it is about Harlem, the messiness and the politics with Mariah, and the gang wars as well, but also the great, things about Harlem, about, somebody like a Luke Cage standing up for, protecting people, and I think that all that kind of stuff, it's great. I think Luke Cage's speech later on about Harlem, and I think all that stuff, it's awesome. I'm really glad that they did that. That's one of the strengths of the show to me. Speaking of the gangster or the gang wars, I think that I'm a pretty big sucker for this kind of stuff. I wouldn't consider it so much gang warfare as just political drama, even though it's not necessarily politics. But I mean, there are politics in the show with Mariah. I think Mariah is such an interesting character to juxtapose with her cousin Cottonmouth. The kind of underbelly of criminal activity mixed in with seedy and corrupt politicians, I think, is a very interesting juxtaposition to have in a show like this. And I think that all of that kind of stuff, I know I'm using the same shows and movies to compare it to all the time, but these are things that stick in my mind. It reminds me of why I love the Penguin so much, because it's not like you're rooting for any of the characters necessarily, maybe aside from Vic, and even then, towards the end, Vic is really going off the deep end there. But I think it's the intrigue of how these different criminal factions are fighting against one another for supremacy in a very enclosed space. That's what I love about these kinds of shows, is that while it's taking place in a big area, physically, a section of a city, or Gotham City, parts of Gotham City, in the Penguin, or Harlem in Luke Cage, it feels very confined in an interesting way, where there is limited space and people are jockeying for power, jockeying for territory, and really trying to get a foothold, trying to make a way in all of this craziness. And I think that is something that I think is super, super interesting. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the performances. I thought that is it Alfre Woodard did a great job as Mariah. I think Mahershala Ali was fantastic as Cornell Stokes. I'm talking more so about the supporting characters than anything else. I thought that they were all great. I forget the actor's name who played Diamondback, but I think that he also did a very good job. Though we'll talk about Diamondback in just a second. But I think that supporting characters, it was really great to see Rosario Dawson. I think that the actress playing Misty Knight was also really good. And we'll obviously see more of her as we move along in this Defenders saga rewatch. I at least remember her from Defenders, so we'll definitely see more of her going forward. But I think that the supporting characters, cast of characters, was much stronger. I think even Shades was not my favorite, but suitably creepy and not I don't know how to describe him, but just a henchman-y kind of way, who's kind of secretly vying for power. So I definitely think that what made this show, what it was really the surroundings, the characters, the crew of criminals, and even characters like Pop right at the beginning. I know Pop died very early on, but even characters like him, really gave the show what the character that it was. It gave the show the life that it really took on. I think that was great. I will say, I do think Luke Cage himself, Mike Coulter. Now, I am positive Luke Cage, Mike Coulter, was told to play the character in this way very specifically. And that's good and all. And I'm sure that is very accurate to the comic books and whatnot. And again, that's good and all. I found his character, generally speaking, I know they keep calling it out in the show, and that's fine. They can keep calling it out. It doesn't make it any more interesting to me or any less egregious. He is so one note as a character to me. I think that as much as Jessica Jones, the entire season, while showing some moments and flashes of vulnerability, I suppose, or, cracks in the armor, if you will, or whatnot, fine, that's fine and all. But for the most part in Jessica Jones Season 1, she was ornery, she was miserable, she was cynical, and that's just who she was, right? And that's fine. That's her character. It got a little bit old. In the same way, I think Mike Coulter's Luke Cage, just performance-wise, character-wise, was a little bit one note. And I'm sure that Mike Coulter played it exactly how he was supposed to. I think by the 5th time he says ollies, by the 6th time he says a little saying before he goes off, and Rosario Dawson says, "You're so corny." I was over it. I was over it. Not that I disliked him his performance or anything like that. I think it was just not interesting as I hoped it would be. I think there are some interesting things about the character, like how he got his powers, his time at Seagate. I think that episode is actually quite interesting to see how he became who he was. And that part, I think allowed Mike Coulter to have more of a personality and play with his performance more than at any other point in the entire show, which, again, a little concerning to me. But I think that him as a character, it didn't work as well as I was hoping to. Now, I don't remember disliking him or really anybody in the Defenders season, so we'll see if I remember him any differently in that show. But I will say he just wasn't as interesting of a character to follow as I was hoping for, is all. The other thing about this show, because like I said, I in general, I enjoyed the story. I think that the political dynamics, the gang wars, and the vying for Harlem in ways of going through politics, but in corrupt ways, or Luke Cage trying to fight his way through righteously and do it the right way, and Cottonmouth, with weapons, and Diamondback trying to get, all that stuff is really interesting to me. I liked all of that, quite frankly. I really did. And I liked Luke Cage's dynamic with Cottonmouth, that he wasn't related to Cottonmouth or anything like that. but they made the dynamic work really well of Cottonmouth. It's like, this guy is in my way. And then all of a sudden he's starting to realize Luke Cage is a problem. He's a real problem. To Diamondback, where he is related to Diamondback and they have a more personal connection. All that stuff. Really great. But to me, Luke Cage, the biggest problem with Luke Cage, because I think the second biggest problem to me is just Luke Cage's character, personality-wise, it's just not as interesting. The second, or the biggest problem to me, though, rather, is that this, and it's the second season out of the first 5 that I've watched that suffers from this problem. This is 2 shows in one. And I'm a little baffled because this one is the most egregious that it's been. Daredevil Season 2, we just talked about that a couple weeks ago, has two shows in it. Now, granted, I think Daredevil Season 2, what that show did, at least, what that season did, was at least attempt to tie those things together. I don't think it did it super well. I think that when it had to sacrifice different parts of each storyline to get where it needed to go, and that's fine and all. I think that the Elektra season, though, and the Hand could have been an entire season leading up to Defenders, and I think similarly, the Punisher arc could have been another entire season, right? So I was a little bit disappointed by that, right? Luke Cage is even more egregious. I think that the sharp cutoff between the Luke and Cottonmouth conflict to the Luke and Diamondback conflict was so evident that it should have been 2 seasons. It was almost mind-boggling. It was almost like I was watching 2 seasons of a show. Granted, there are 3 lines, like Mariah and Shades and whatnot. But it really, really split itself in half. And like I said, I didn't inherently dislike anything about either half. I would say the first half is stronger, for sure. But I think Diamondback was a suitably menacing villain. I like their connection. Although, the amount of monologues that Diamondback gives towards the end of the show is kind of baffling to me. But I didn't dislike any of that, right? I was a little surprised to see that this show just decided to go, yeah, we're good here with Mahershala. Let's pivot here and let's do something else. Because I think Mahershala Ali was one of the strongest parts of the show, quite frankly. So, again, I really enjoyed Luke Cage on balance. I think there are a couple glaring, quote-unquote, glaring problems with the show that I had, personally. But overall, I was pleasantly surprised. Not that I was expecting to hate Luke Cage or anything like that. I just hadn't heard about Luke Cage in the same conversations I heard about, obviously, all the seasons of Daredevil and also even some of Jessica Jones. And I was surprised. I really enjoyed my watch with Luke Cage. It was pretty easy to get through in terms of, I talked about how Jessica Jones took me a while just because I felt like every episode I was like, oh, okay, next one. Daredevil is such a breeze. Every episode, it just goes so fast. And I think Luke Cage, I was surprised. I was actually quite surprised, pleasantly so. And I think, given the right story, given the right circumstances, and we'll see how I think of him in the Defenders coming up, but would very much like to see him come back in the MCU at some point. So guys, what did you think of the first season of Luke Cage? Is this one of your favorites, or maybe you don't like it as much as I did? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, well I suppose it's not entirely true to say that there aren't any MCU shows coming out between Ironheart, which is happening right now. We're going to talk about it more later on in this podcast episode. My full thoughts on the entire season, and the December show, 2025 December show of Wonder Man. I suppose it's not entirely true that there isn't anything else MC related coming out between now and then, because aside from Fantastic Four First Steps, we also have some animated shows. And to be quite honest with you, if you've been following me on the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, you know that I haven't been the biggest fan of the animated shows. Now, granted, there have been some wins here and there. I think some individual episodes of What If, especially season 1, were pretty good. The Doctor Strange episode stands out in particular, but also the Hank Pym episode. There are some good things about that first season of What If, I maintain. And, I was quite surprised. I wasn't even going to do weekly episodes of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, but I decided to give it a whirl just because I thought, well, it's a little bit slower in January, and that's when the show came out. I kind of thought, let's just give it a try. And I ended up reviewing the entire season because I thought that was really good. Really quite good. So Marvel Animation has had some wins here and there. But X-Men 97, I didn't love, but I enjoyed for what it was. But let's be honest, right? And this is just me personally speaking. Marvel Animation, most of What If has just been not great at all, in my opinion. And Marvel Zombies, it just doesn't look super great. So I'm a little skeptical. But to me, what the promise of these shows are, these animated shows are, is to execute on concepts that are just too hard to do in live action. Because honestly, what I respect about the idea of doing a what if is that you just cannot pull that off feasibly in live action. And even doing it in animation, but getting all these voice actors or all these live action actors to come back and voice their characters is remarkable. I think that actually is a lot of money that they're probably spending on that. But, it's one of those concepts where you just can't do that show in live action. And I'm not saying that every single animated show has to be an anthology, right? Not related to the sacred timeline. I'm not saying that's the criteria for it. X-Men 97 is an example of that for sure. What If is an example of that. But I really like what we're going to talk about here is the concept of what they're doing with the Eyes of Wakanda, where you're taking a concept of what I'm presuming, nobody's confirmed this to me, but it seems the case, that this show is going to be canonical to the Sacred Timeline. It's going to be going through the history of Wakanda. What these animated shows, I believe the potential of these animated shows truly lies in, is exploring different pockets of the MCU that, again, you might not be able to justify fully doing it in live action. Although, Eyes of Wakanda could have been a live action show, perhaps. But I like that it's, if you're going to just do short little anthology episodes, I think that animation is a great medium to do it, especially probably with how expensive it is to film things in the Wakandan sets and whatnot. So I'm all for this kind of idea of taking these episodes or taking these shows and really putting them in different corners of the MCU that you don't get to see otherwise, it's just not as reasonable. So all that to set up the fact that we're here to talk about this tiny little sneak peek for Eyes of Wakanda, which, in itself is not anything in particular. We get some shots here. I do like the animated style. I think it's a little bit different than the flatter, more 2D animation style that they've been going for thus far. I like it. I think it's good. And I think that, what this proves to me is everything that we've just been talking about the idea that we are taking some time here. Probably, I think it's 4 episodes. They're probably going to be 20 to 30 minutes long, so that's fine. It's not going to be that long. But really taking some time to just dive into the history of Wakanda and seeing it from different perspectives throughout the ages. And I think that is a super interesting concept. We talked about a while ago the idea that, or the fact that Iron Fist is going to be appearing, and Iron Fist rather, not Danny Rand apparently, is going to be appearing in Eyes of Wakanda. So let's just explore what this show can tell us about Wakanda. It's like one of those things where I think because of the way that Marvel had been approaching television, you have to watch the show to understand this movie. And people can say, and I've argued that perhaps you don't need to watch every single show to understand what's going on in the movies. But if you didn't watch Miss Marvel, you probably were very confused with a movie like The Marvels. If you didn't watch WandaVision, which, seemed like a lot of people did, but some people didn't, and they were very confused with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I think that the idea of not even live action shows, but just MCU shows in general, being like, let's just fill out this universe, let's paint it in a different way. And if we're going to focus on the Defenders, like the Daredevils of the world, then let's kind of just paint this as a different corner of the MCU. They don't all have to make it into the movies. They don't all have to be leading characters in the movies, and see where we go from there. I think this is a really fun idea. The little sneak peek, again, what I like about this is that, what the narration is saying is that narrator is saying that you don't know all the secrets about Wakanda. And I think that that's super fun. Each episode kind of explores a different hidden side of what Wakanda is. From the trailer, I think the animation looks cool. I always love going back to Wakanda. It's one of my favorite settings in the MCU, just anything that they've done in the MCU. And I think that that's exciting to be able to see that. So look, this isn't going to make my list of top 5 most anticipated pieces of media that I want to see in 2025. It just simply isn't, based on what the nature of it is, just being an anthology animated series. But I am excited about this. I think actually quite a bit more than I originally thought I would be. So the sneak peek is out. I don't know if we're going to get a full-length trailer for this, honestly, but we'll see how this goes. It's also another thing that Ryan Coogler is executive producing, which makes sense, and it, seems like he's got his projects lined up, Ironheart and Eyes of Wakanda, for summer of 2025. So did you guys have a chance to check out the sneak peek for Eyes of Wakanda, and did you enjoy it? Are you excited about this little anthology show series? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, before 2025 started, I would have been so surprised if you had told me one of your top 5 favorite movies of 2025 thus far was Lilo and Stitch. Lilo and Stitch, I would have guessed that it would have been a cute movie, for sure. But just based on the recent track record of Disney live-action remakes, I just wasn't so sure if this movie was going to deliver in the same way that an Aladdin did. And in my opinion, again, I say this as somebody who has not seen the original in a long time, at the very least, as far as I remember. And so I understand that there are many people who have commented on my review saying, I love the original, this isn't even close to it. I totally respect that. Totally respect that. in fairness, because I'm not just somebody who's like, oh, if I haven't seen the original, I love the remake automatically. And if it's, if I have seen the original, I hate the remake automatically. Case in point, How to Train Your Dragon, the recent live action one, loved it. Love the original, have huge nostalgia for the original. So anyways, case in point. But I just, I hadn't seen the original and I loved the new live action remake. I thought it was great. It was adorable. It had a great a cast and I thought that the emotional core was really sweet. And so I was very, very happy about all of that. And so then I think, it was only fair to wonder, are we getting a sequel? Especially because Lilo and Stitch has crushed at the box office. It has made hundreds of millions of dollars for Disney. It is very clearly one of the more profitable movies over the last few years, which is good because, other films like Snow White are not doing so well and tanking a little bit at the box office. Captain America: Brave New World, Thunderbolts not doing so well. So yeah, I mean, it's not been great for Disney overall, although they've had some smash hits. And so now Lilo and Stitch is a movie that is making up for that a little bit. And lo and behold, by the way, Lilo and Stitch having grossed over $910 million at the box office, which is crazy. I'm reading these numbers right now. Crazy, crazy numbers. And now it's official. Lilo and Stitch 2 is coming to theaters. That would have to be coming to theaters. So it is official that the sequel to the live-action Lilo and Stitch is coming. It has been confirmed by all of the major trades, which is really exciting to me because, again, I think that the lesson here is not just let's remake everything we can in sight, although that seems to be what Disney is doing anyways, but I think rather the lesson is let's do it well, let's make it good, and if people enjoy it, they're going to come out and see it. The live-action Aladdin, I think Aladdin 2, it was in development, it was going to be made, right? If not for, I suspect, at least in big part because of A, COVID, right? The pandemic, stunted that. And then also B, a big part of that was also, I think, what happened to Will Smith. I think you just couldn't do Aladdin 2 because of a lot of the things that happened at the Oscars with Will Smith. But, case in point, I think you want to reward the right movies. You want to reward the movies that really stand out and do well. And remake, sequel, prequel, original movie, whatever. I think you want to reward those movies as well. If you guys forget that, and I forget this as well a lot of the times, that these sequels come from, for the most part, original movies, right? So, and they were rewarded for that. So I think that getting a Lilo and Stitch 2 is a very, very exciting proposition in my mind. And I think that they would be really great to see. I don't know if it's going to follow Lilo and Stitch 2 to a T, I hope. I'm curious to see if that is the case. And again, I haven't seen Lilo and Stitch 2. I don't think I've seen Lilo and Stitch 2 at all. I'm pretty sure I've seen Lilo and Stitch 1, the animated version, but I don't think I've seen Lilo and Stitch 2, kind of similar to The Lion King. So I'm very curious to see what kind of approach they take. But I think, again, case in point, I think this is a really good thing, and I am very excited for this. So quick little segment here about Lilo and Stitch 2. Again, it's a film that I very much am looking forward to whenever it comes out, hopefully within the next, 12 to 18 months. Hopefully it doesn't get delayed too much, and then we will see where we go from there. Guys, what do you think of this news that Lilo and Stitch 2, after the phenomenal, massive success of Lilo and Stitch, the live-action film, is going to get a sequel? What do you think about this? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, there are many, many, many questions swirling around this new little independent film called Spider-Man Brand New Day. There are so many questions. There are so many rumors, so many leaks. It's almost like the new Fantastic Four First Steps casting rumor mill. Almost, it's getting to that point where every villain under the sun is being discussed, and every hero under the sun is being discussed. Now we have confirmation from a lot of the major sources that John Bernthal is returning as Punisher, and we have rumors of Hulk, which I personally am a little bit on the fence about how you can have a movie with Hulk and Punisher and Spider-Man, and tonally that works, but we'll see. It could be true. I'm just waiting for more of the official trades to confirm that. These are all rumors thus far. And then on the villain side, every villain that hasn't appeared in live-action Spider-Man has basically been rumored for this movie. Scorpion, Tombstone, Mr. Negative, and a few others that I'm forgetting as well. Black Cat, I think, was rumored at one point. Female villain that was going to be played by Nicole Kidman, apparently. So just everything under the sun. And not all of these can be true, by the way. Not all of these are going to be true. And one interesting thing is, based on all of this, what is... we're all asking the question what the story is, right? Because I think what's a little bit unclear is what the production timeline of this movie has been. Because think about it, right? If the movie is getting set to film, which we're going to talk about in just a second, then that means the story, regardless of whatever you hear from leakers and scoopers and whatnot, the story is set. Now, it can be changed, right, around the edges, and it can be, I mean, if Marvel hates it like they did with Daredevil Born Again, they can reshoot it if they want to, but as of right now, as we enter production, the story is what the story is, in general. You have to sign actors onto contracts, and you have to build sets and do VFX shots. All these things happen months and months and months in advance of a movie coming out. So I don't always, in fact, I almost never ascribe to those rumors and leaks that say Avengers Doomsday doesn't have a script ready, right? And Spider-Man Brand New Day doesn't even know who its villain is. No, they know. I think when Destin Daniel Cretton got on stage at CinemaCon, he knew exactly who the villain of the movie was going to be, and probably was in the process of casting, maybe even had already cast whoever that person was going to be. So I think that all that is, I throw it out the window, honestly, because they know. I think they know what the story is. And so, interestingly, to kind of clear up the timeline of the production, Tom Holland, I don't think it was leaked necessarily. I think it was some kind of, social media post or whatever that he was doing, where he basically said, hey, we're getting ready to do Spider-Man Brand New Day very soon. Now, this is interesting because first of all, what it confirms to me, at the very least, is that we are, so he's done with the Odyssey, one would presume. And I don't know if he's filming anything for Avengers Doomsday, but I think that there is a distinct possibility that he could do things a little bit simultaneously, or maybe he's going to do Avengers Doomsday right now, and then he's going to go into Spider-Man Brand New Day. He said soon, I believe, is the terminology. I don't think he gave an exact timetable or exact season, so perhaps Spider-Man Brand New Day could be filming in the next 6 months. Maybe that's what soon means, and he could film Avengers Doomsday in the meantime. Who knows? But I think that is, that can kind of clears it up that Spider-Man Brand New Day is going to be filming soon, and then we'll see where we go from there. Why this is interesting, though, is because Spider-Man Brand New Day has a release date of July 2026, which is in just over a year. And that's significant because if you want to hit that release date, filming should be starting soon. If a film shoot is, let's just say, about 3 months, max, 2 months usually, but 2 to 3 months max, with reshoots, then that gives the filmmakers 9 months to finish up the movie. And that should be plenty of time. But if you start to push that timetable even just a little bit more, we start to get into crunch territory, crunch time, is that what we call it? Where we have to start rushing things a little bit here, just based on what I know from film production. And so I think that, it's clear to me that because Avengers Doomsday was pushed back to December 2026, Spider-Man Brand New Day, I don't think at this point, if we are entering production now, because it's one thing if we say Spider-Man Brand New Day is not going to be filming for another, year, 2 years or whatever. It's one thing to say that. It's another thing entirely to say if Spider-Man Brand New Day is indeed going to be in production soon, because then it means that the film is it's barreling full steam ahead. So in my mind, what this confirms is that Spider-Man Brand New Day is going to stick with that release date in July 2026. That is what I am going to say. So anyways, guys, this is all I think it's good. I think it's positive. We had heard reports before that Spider-Man Brand New Day was going to take place concurrently with Avengers Doomsday. So I don't think that the Doomsday delay really affects Spider-Man Brand New Day's story at all. I do think it's going to be acting like in Ant-Man and the Wasp was to Avengers Infinity War Endgame, and I think that it's going to, I think that at this point, Tom Holland is definitely going to appear in Avengers Doomsday, just because of the shifts in filming and whatnot, and so we'll see how all of these things shake out. Guys, what do you think about the news that Spider-Man Brand New Day is apparently heading into production and is filming pretty soon? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, before we talk about Jurassic World Rebirth, before we get to that movie, we'll definitely be doing a non-spoiler and spoiler review later on in this podcast, but let's talk about the little treat that came before it, only in theaters, as Christopher Nolan likes to do. Let's talk about the teaser trailer for the Odyssey. Now, full disclosure, like most people, I'm assuming, I've only seen the trailer once, and it was in theaters, and I tried to take it all in, soak it in, and, it was only about 20 to 30 seconds of actual footage, but we'll talk about what we saw here. But yeah, if I get things wrong, if you guys remember things differently, let me know in the comments, because I have only seen the trailer once. I haven't really looked up, or I've seen the leaked versions online, because I don't really want to do that. I prefer not to look at leaked footage and things like that. And unless, I suppose I could. It's feasible. I could use my AMC A-list and literally just book tickets for Jurassic World Rebirth every single day and just go and watch the trailer and leave. I suppose I could do that. I don't know why I would. All that to say, I've only seen this trailer once. So we'll talk about what I saw, and we'll talk about some of my thoughts there. But the first trailer for the Odyssey, first of all, interesting to note that the trailer admits to this, that this movie is a year away. And it is, it's way, 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 way early to be making to be releasing a trailer like this under normal circumstances. The reason that I think this is more okay, or that, why Christopher Nolan did this, is because I think for most people who don't follow movies like we do, and for most people who don't keep up with these things, they don't know when the next Christopher Nolan movie is, and they don't even know what it is, right? And so I think just getting this on people's radars all of a sudden, to very smartly attached to a movie that, I think everyone's going to see, quite frankly. I think this movie, Jurassic World Rebirth, is going to do very, very well, is a very smart idea. Because now, right, even before a first teaser trailer comes out, which I'm assuming, like an actual teaser trailer, which I'm assuming will probably be in the fall at some point, Christopher Nolan has now put this movie on people's minds. Like, it's now in the pop culture zeitgeist, and people are like, oh yeah, Christopher Nolan, next movie, The Odyssey. Can't wait to see it. Tom Holland's in it. Great. And Jon Bernthal's in it. Great. Although I'm sure that most people recognize Tom Holland. So I think in terms of why they did why they decided to do this, I think that that's a very, to me, that's the explanation, and it makes sense to me. Now, as for the trailer itself, obviously we don't see a whole lot. We see the ocean, we see a good bit of ocean, and then we hear Tom Holland talking about his father, because I think Tom Holland, I forget the character's name, but Tom Holland is playing Odysseus' son. Odysseus played by Matt Damon, and I want to say Telemachus. Telemachus is a character in the Odyssey. I just don't remember if that's the name of Odysseus' son. But anyways, Tom Holland is playing his son, and he's talking to Jon Bernthal, who I'm not quite sure who he's playing in the movie based on the dialogue here. What I found interesting, though, first of all, just to get this out of the way, the trailer looks great. In terms of, and when I say look, visually, the ocean and the very few glimpses of scenes that we got, and sort of the moody lighting that we see Tom Holland and Jon Bernthal, and I think it all looks great, and I'm very, very excited. Obviously, with the Christopher Nolan movie, the cinematography, the filmmaking, quote unquote filmmaking aspects of it are all very top notch and immaculate. So I expected nothing less. The other interesting thing I noticed here was that they seem to be, and I haven't read the Odyssey in a long while. I did read it a while ago. I read the Iliad as well. It's been a while. It's been a long while. I don't remember, I can't recall if the lines that they were saying are verbatim from the Odyssey. It did seem very rhythmic, though. It did seem that like they were sticking to sort of the poetic meter of the Odyssey, which, for those of you who haven't read the Odyssey, it was written by Homer, or there's a whole bunch of debates about who actually, who Homer is and who wrote the Odyssey. But it was written in very, I want to say, in very early AD or BC. I think even BC. And it was obviously a Greek epic. And so, there's this idea of, the way that the Odyssey was written. It was in a Homeric kind of rhythm, right? It's poem, it's poetry in a sense. And so the way that these characters were speaking seemed very in line with that. And I don't know if it's verbatim. I don't know if it's exact quotations, but I think that that's an interesting tell, because you could obviously make a movie with the Odyssey where you just have them speak quote unquote normal dialogue, Western dialogue, how we're used to hearing characters talk, except they're just talking in these Greek epics. And that's one way to do it. And I wouldn't have been mad at it at all if Christopher Nolan decided to do that. I just think it's interesting if he decides to take the route of going even more adhering to the original foundational text and having the characters talk in that way. We'll see. But overall, I enjoyed what I saw, and yeah, this is really a way to just get people's attention, who are seeing Jurassic World, who have no idea that this movie is coming out, and now people do, and so I think that is a good thing. Guys, have you seen Jurassic World Rebirth, and then by proxy, have you seen the first teaser trailer for the Odyssey? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, well, with the conclusion of the MCU show Ironheart, it might be hard to believe, we've actually finished another phase of the MCU. Come July 25th, I'm going to say 24th, when Fantastic Four First Steps hits theaters, we are actually entering Phase 6, the final phase, for some, very thankfully, the final phase of the multiverse saga. And so, we are here to talk today about the final project of the MCU's Phase 5, Ironheart. Now, we'll talk more about this in a segment we're going to do a little bit later on in the podcast, ranking every single project in the MCU Phase 5. But the long and short of it is that the phases, while they never really meant anything before, it's not like, at the end of Ant-Man or at the end of the first Avengers, Iron Man looks at the camera and he goes, that's it, Phase 1 is done. Well, what could it mean? Although in the first Avengers, ironically, there was a little bit of a hint towards Phase 2, quote unquote, because of the weapons they were making. But I think that's more tongue-in-cheek. That has nothing to do, really, with the phases. It's more just a scheme. And really, I mean, what Phase 4 and Phase 5 has taught us is that they don't really mean anything anymore. And so that is what it is. But it's a easy enough organizing device for us to rank projects and look back on them. And who knows, maybe this will start our Phase 5 rewatch after the DCE rewatch that will hopefully be coming out at some point. So, but we also have the Defenders Saga rewatch. So long way to go until we get there. But still. So anyways, we're here to talk about Ironheart episodes 4 through 6 and the season as a whole, the entire season. This will be a spoiler discussion. So if you have not seen Ironheart episodes 4 through 6 or the entire season, make sure to just save this segment, save the podcast, save the YouTube video, wherever you're watching for later, and then come back once you have seen the episodes, or you don't care about spoilers. Welcome in. Let's talk about Ironheart. So like I said before, with the release schedule of Ironheart, it's interesting because they obviously did episodes 1 through 3 and then episodes 4 through 6 in 2 weeks, and that was a little bit of a red flag to begin with. And also, I maintain that the way that shows are released have a pretty big impact on how we view them. For example, I think WandaVision, while still great, still fantastic in a binge model, as we did with the rewatch series for Phase 4, as I just binged through the episodes, still great. But part of the initial excitement and the initial, the appeal to the show, and part of what makes me look back on it so fondly is the week-to-week anticipation between these episodes. And so, while it's hard to say whether or not, I would have enjoyed Ironheart more or maybe even significantly less if they had released it week to week, it didn't bode super well. I mean, releasing 3 episodes in 3 episodes, it feels weird. It feels like you're watching half of a movie and then waiting a week and watching the rest of the other half of the movie. And so, looking back at Ironheart as a whole, we'll talk in detail about some of the things in these 3 episodes and then just quickly on the season as a whole. But, you probably have already seen it just based on if you're watching the segment clip or if you're looking on YouTube. The way that I probably will have titled this segment, it encapsulates how I feel about Ironheart. And that is this. Ironheart, to me, is a sketch of a really, really good show. It is a sketch of a phenomenal show, but a sketch, meaning that that sketches, right, just by nature, it's just the outline. You can see how it will be filled in. You can see the different pieces there, but it's not complete. It's not even near complete. It feels unfinished. And that's what Ironheart feels to me. And sketches use shorthand, use sloppier drawing techniques just to convey the ideas to where it's going to be a completed thing, a completed product a little bit later. But it's there to convey the ideas. And to me, Ironheart is a sketch of a very, very good show. Episodes 4 through 6. And of course, we're going to talk about Mephisto. We're going to talk about the big twist at the end, whatever. We'll talk about that in just a second. But before we even get there, there were so many times as I was watching these final 3 episodes where I went, that's a really interesting idea. How did we get there? Or, that's interesting. That wasn't set up at all. So I'm going to, I'm looking at my notes here. I'm just going to run through a couple of these things just as an example. First of all, Ironheart and her mom just running into magic people. And look, it's an interesting idea, but these characters, again, halfway through this show, just came out of nowhere. And it was like, oh, all of a sudden, hey, you kind of want magic. And it was shown again in the post-credit scene with Anthony Ramos's Parker. He was like, hey, I'm kind of interested in magic. So is magic that prevalent? Like, are wizards just like, yeah, or sorcerers just like, hey, yeah, I'll show you some magic. It doesn't matter to me. Is that allowed? Like, because they said these 2 characters, Zelma, is that her name? She was a Comertage dropout, I think is what her mom was. And so, is Wong just like, yeah, like go out there and just hang out, right? Like Benjamin Bratt's character in Doctor Strange was using magic, but very, very rudimentary magic just to heal his back. And then obviously Mordo had a problem with that. Is Mordo running around here like, hey, there's these magic people in Chicago? This is all kind of beside the point. What I'm really trying to say here, more so than the MCU continuity logic, because honestly that matters much, much less to me than the actual story that's being told, is that these characters came out of nowhere to me. And it's like, okay, I guess you have magic people running around and here to tell you about it. It's Dormammu, which, by the way, a clever setup, because I'm sure they knew, or maybe they had an inkling after WandaVision that, oh, everyone's interested in Mephisto, so let's do a little bit of a misdirect. And I was like, oh, interesting, because the misdirect was like, oh, maybe it is Dormammu. Like, that would have made sense as well, especially with Clea. Maybe it would have even made more sense, honestly, with Clea allegedly being in the MCU now with Doctor Strange. So, and Clea is the niece of Dormammu in the comics, for those of you who don't know. So, that was one thing That was one thing that was really weird. The other another big thing is Ironheart building an Iron Man suit in a garage out of a car, because I think it's one thing if she builds an Iron Man suit that resembles, what the Mark 1 or something in between the Mark 1 and the Mark 2. That's fine and all. This suit, though, was comparable to her other suits. And I was looking at it and I was like, there are logic leaps, and then there's this, and it has nothing to do with Riri Williams as a character and questioning her genius and whatnot. Because I know that there are some people who are like, no, just because she's not, let's be honest, a white man, she can't do this, and that's totally wrong. That has nothing to do with it. It's really just stretching the realm of believability here, where it's like, oh, can people just do this? Because I get it. Like one of the hopes that I had heading into Ironheart was that they were really going to show that she was a genius, and they did. I think they didn't have enough time to really dive into it, but they did. Although it seems like anyone who has access to a computer and can type really fast is just a genius now in the MCU. I digress. It's one thing, though, in Wakanda, when you have access to literally generationally advanced technology, right, in Wakanda with vibranium. That's one thing to build an Iron Man suit in a couple days. To build it in a garage out of a car is, I don't know. I mean, that's crazy to me. So that's another thing. A third thing, right, and this is probably the last thing, because there were other areas where I was like, what is going on? Like, how does that make sense? Is Ezekiel Stane. I like the character in general. I like Alden Ehrenreich as Ezekiel Stane. First of all, didn't give hardly any characterization to him at all after the reveal that he was Ezekiel Stane in episode 3. Then it was just like, yeah, like, I don't want to be my dad. I'm going to prison. I'm angry at you. Which, by the way, that was a good scene. I like that the scene where he was talking to Riri in the prison. But, and then it's like, hey, I'm going to take this deal with Parker, which, okay, slow down, but okay, sure, I can buy that. And then I'm just going to sit down on this table and get nanites injected into my body. Like, whoa, really? Like that quickly? On top of the fact, I mean, more of a logically, but that these nanites can actually work, like this technology exists in the world. And I get it, it's Ezekiel Stane, it's not just anybody, but still, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And then he turns into Emperor Palpatine and just starts shooting lightning out of his fingers. And I was like, what is happening? And I don't know much about Ezekiel Stane in the comics. Maybe that is his power. Maybe he literally is Emperor Palpatine in the comics. But that was bizarre to me. Again, these things are interesting in isolation. Like the fact that Ezekiel Stane really doesn't want to be like his father, but kind of ends up becoming like his father, but still has a soft spot for Riri Williams. And then he also has been messing around with this technology, this biotechnology. Like all that stuff is interesting in concept. And, the other thing I wanted to point out quickly is Parker, right? Parker, the fact that he, wanted to get back at his father, his really, really rich father who abandoned him, that is a really good setup. That's a really good emotional motivation for him as a character to then want to go out and prove him wrong, become, what do you say, filthy, disgusting, greasy rich or whatever. That makes sense. It's just that it came out of nowhere. I mean, you have like 5 minutes where they're talking to one another and then it's just over and you're like, oh, I mean, that's it? Like, I would have loved to have spent maybe 20 minutes, an entire episode about this entire thing, which, this is a theme. And on the one hand, you can't really blame Ironheart, because Ironheart was coming out at the time. It was filmed 3 years ago. In 2022, Ironheart was filmed in 2022. And for whatever reason, and I'm sure we'll get an explanation in 10 years or at some point of why this show took so long to come out. But this was coming out at the time when the 6-episode Disney Plus shows were perceived to have been working. And to be fair, some of them, like Hawkeye, I think really do work. Loki Season 2 really do work. We'll talk about that in the Phase 5 rankings. But, even Loki Season 2, I think, should have been just put with Loki Season 1 as 12 episodes. But I digress. This was out at the time when it was just like, make as many 6-episode shows as you possibly can, instead of making fewer shows that were 12 to 15 episodes, which would have been great. I think Ironheart would have been a great 12 episode show. I really, really do. And so all these things are outlines of a very, very good show. We spend like 20 minutes in the show at White Castle with Riri Williams getting attacked, which is fine. Like, it's in isolation, those kinds of things are fine. Except it's 6 episodes, and each episode, to be fair, each episode was a little bit longer than the normal Disney Plus fare. They were about, I would say, 35 to 45, 50 minutes, which is good. That's good. More so in the 40-minute range. That's good. Like, if each episode is 40 minutes long, I'm good with that. Instead of the, like, 28-minute episodes that Agatha were, for example. But, and Agatha was a different show. I maintain that. I understand that. But I just think it's like we can't be spending real estate, precious real estate, if you will, on a fight scene at White Castle, is my opinion. It just took away from the momentum of the show because people had been saying in their first reactions to Ironheart that the show is okay, the show is fine, the show is whatever, but the ending is good. And so the ending, right? We'll talk about Mephisto now. The ending is interesting. The ending is very interesting. I did not see the twist coming of her taking the deal. I didn't see that coming. That's interesting to me. All these things, right? All these things are set up for a very interesting next season where you have Ezekiel Stane, who is kind of out there being like an enemy, and then also, vaguely on her side. And then you have this idea of Mephisto because she took the deal with Mephisto. That is super interesting as a character choice. And I think it is totally in line because when the first episode came out, I was, the show starts and it's intentional. It's dropping you right into the flashbacks between Natalie and Riri. And I was like, what is this? Like, what's going on? But by the time you get to the last shots of the season, you're like, oh, understood. And all those discussions about, is it ethical to even bring back a person from life with AI? That's super interesting. Granted, while it was fleshed out more than the other things I just talked about, I think that it should have still been fleshed out a little bit more. But really interesting concept that leads to this finale with her and Mephisto, which, by the way, Sacha Baron Cohen did a really good job as Mephisto. I don't know, based on the model that they're doing now with movie characters and TV characters mostly being sidelined and mostly being siloed, if he's going to show up ever again in a big capacity. But I really liked him. I thought he did a very, very good job. And so we end the show in a very interesting place where Riri Williams has brought her friend back to life and has taken a deal with the devil. That is very interesting. The question becomes, is Riri Williams, I have a really hard time saying that, Riri Williams, is she ever going to show up again in the MCU in a big role? They're thinking about doing Champions. If they do Champions, which is Young Avengers basically, could she be the villain? I think that would be a fascinating arc for her. Because I think that while she made her big screen debut in Black Panther Wakanda Forever, it looks like they're moving away from that. She might appear again in Avengers Doomsday. She might. But then how are you going to explain the fact that she's possessed by the devil? Like, what is that? How are you going to explain that? So I don't know how that's going to function in future projects in continuity with the MCU. But I do know that the show ended on a very interesting place. So overall, as we look back on this season, I didn't love it. I thought it was okay in places, but never were there moments where I was so locked into the characters and so captivated about what was going on. I know they called it out, but I said it before in the previous spoiler discussion, but the hood itself as a costume looks just silly. And I know they call it out. I know they do, but it looks silly to me. There are just so many things in this show that I'm like, oh, really interesting. Oh, it's over. Oh, what's that? Oh, that's over. And oh, how did we get there? That doesn't make any sense. There were so many moments in the show that were like that. And it just left me feeling like I missed something, like I was wanting. That being said, the things that they did set up in the show. So now Riri Williams has her best friend back. And now, now she's experienced a lot of things. Now she has Mephisto on her side. Maybe Sacha Baron Cohen can be a supporting character in the next season, if they do next season. Because honestly, I don't know if that's going to happen, right? I like the magic and tech stuff. I like Ezekiel Stane. There are things that make me go, I do want to see where this goes next. And I think that, there's potential here. But overall, I cannot say that I loved Ironheart Season 1. I know when I say, for example, Moon Knight Season 1 was missed potential, I mean that there was brilliant stuff that you saw. Like, Episode 1 was brilliant of Moon Knight. And I think the concept of Episode 5 of Moon Knight was brilliant. It's just that there were messy things here and then the finale kind of fell flat, whatever. I think Ironheart is a step down from that when I say missed potential for Ironheart, because I think Ironheart, nothing in Ironheart really made me go, oh, wow, that's amazing, right? Maybe aside from the ending, that was great. That was really well done. But they planted the seeds for a very interesting next step in her journey. And I'd be lying if I didn't say I didn't want to watch Season 2. I think Dominique Thorne did a good job. And I think that, if Marvel was considering making a Season 2, I'd be interested to see where they were going from there. I just don't know. We'll keep an eye out for the ratings for whatever Ironheart is going to end up at, but I don't know, frankly. So we'll see where we go from there. Guys, those are my thoughts on the last 3 episodes and the entire season of Ironheart. Did you guys have a chance to see it? What did you guys think of Mephisto? I know we've been waiting for him for quite a while now. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, it is time. We have been waiting for this for quite a while now. Not really, but it's a tradition. We've been doing our rankings for since this podcast, since this YouTube channel has been alive, basically for over 5 years now. We've been doing rankings and tier lists, and it's been the lifeblood of this channel, really. And so let's do another one. We did a full MCU ranking using a random number generator right before Captain America: Brave New World, which is a lot of fun. And we did it on live stream, and I'm hoping at some point, if we reach 2,000 subscribers, we're on the road to 2,000 subscribers, so hopefully by the end of 2025, that we could do another live stream, perhaps doing another ranking or just talking about whatever, maybe talking about 2025. But anyways, I digress. We are here to do another ranking, so we're not going to rank the entire MCU because we'd be here. That entire ranking took 3 hours, and so we're not going to do that. We're going to rank just Phase 5, because Phase 5, and we've talked about this before, even in this podcast, we talked about this with Ironheart. But the phases in the MCU have just become obsolete. I mean, Phase 5 started with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which, okay, maybe at the time makes sense with Kang, right? With Kang starting out Phase 5, and ends with Ironheart. And you could argue it really ends with Thunderbolts, but, I mean, even then, sure, I guess. Thunderbolts seems more like a Phase 6 movie, if you ask me. Phase 6 being the arrival of Doctor Doom. Captain America: Brave New World maybe feels like the end. It doesn't matter. There's nothing really to delineate what a phase is anymore. It just is what it is. So, anyways, it's a clean delineation though for us to rank these projects. So now we're going to rank the 12 projects in Phase 5. I believe 6 movies and 6 shows. Could be wrong about that. I have them all listed out here separately, and so we're gonna go and rank them from my least favorite to my favorite. And this is just my personal list. So you guys are definitely going to disagree with what I have to say. Not because my takes are controversial per se, just because they're my own. And I don't expect every single person. I'm sure that, some people in this world have the exact same ranking as I do, but very few, right? And just like how very few people have the same ranking as you, when you have 12 different projects, you're going to have so many different permutations of your own rankings. So let me know what your rankings are in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. But here's one thing that I will say that I think might be a little bit out of the ordinary, a little bit controversial in terms of the MCU. As I was looking back on Phase 5, and as I was making this ranking, I came to this conclusion. And I've said this before about Phase 4 as well, but I wanted to say this about Phase 5. I think Phase 5 is not as bad as we think it is. Now, I maintain, though, and we'll talk about this with each individual project. I'm having such a hard time today. Individual project. We'll talk about this. Phase 5, I think, is easily the worst phase in the MCU. I think that this phase has some of my least favorite projects in the MCU, though not my least favorite. I think my least favorite is still Incredible Hulk to this day. But as I was putting all these projects, every single time I finish watching an MCU project, I put it into my overall ranking. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, a good number of these projects are in that bottom chunk of my MCU rankings, which is a bummer. But there are also some really solid hidden gems in here. In fact, I would say, for the most part, the top, I'll say, we'll go through this, the top maybe 4-ish are projects that I really, really do enjoy. And then the next 3 or 4, I would say the next 4 are projects that I think are ranging from pretty good with missed potential, with some problems in my opinion, to, yeah, it was pretty good, it was fine, not bad. And then the last few are projects that I think are flawed, for sure, very flawed. But even those projects, like none of these projects I'm looking at, I'm going, I hate this thing. And I know, there's one show in particular that a lot of people just hate, and I'll explain why. We've talked about this. I've done reviews for basically every single one of these projects. Have we done reviews for all of them? I think maybe not early Phase 5, so not Ant-Man, not Echo, not Guardians, but definitely the second half of Phase 5. We've done reviews of all of those projects, so you can go check those out on the Access Blockbusters Pod. I have been rambling for a little bit now. Let's get into these rankings. Coming in at number 12 is Echo. And like I said just now, I don't think Echo is terrible. I really don't. I think it's at number 12 because it is so forgettable, in my opinion. It is so incredibly forgettable. I think Kingpin is there, and he's fine. He's there and he's fine. I think Alaco Cox's Maya Lopez is good. He's fine. And I don't remember anything else. I think that, perhaps it's by proxy of the show releasing all 5 episodes at once. And it was in January of 2023, and you're just like, yeah, I'll just watch it and see what happens. I don't know. I don't know if that was the reason why. But it's one of the more forgettable shows in the MCU. Maybe this becomes a project that just kind of quietly creeps up the rankings if we do a rewatch of Phase 5 eventually, which we will. But I put Echo at number 12, not because I hated it, not because I disliked it inherently, because I just can't remember anything about it, to be quite honest with you. Number 11 is The Marvels. Now, The Marvels, as I've talked about this on the YouTube channel, The Marvels is an interesting movie because I think it's not particularly well made. And I don't mean that as disrespect to the directors and writers. I don't mean that to say that they didn't try or they didn't put a good effort in or anything like that they weren't trying. Nothing like that. I just think that the end product that came out of it was not particularly well done. I will admit, though, it is entertaining. I think it is entertaining. I think that the memories scene of the Flurkins was pretty funny. Kamala Khan is a jewel. She's just amazing. I think that, they did a fine enough job with Monica Rambeau and Carol Danvers as characters and their characterizations. The conflict was not interesting. Dar-Ben was not interesting. But I would be lying if I didn't say that the power switching or the play switching was not, uninteresting. I think it was interesting and most of it was entertaining. But I don't think it was a particularly interesting or particularly well-made movie, in my opinion. So number 11 is The Marvels. Number 10 is the show that probably everyone else has at the very bottom of their, not just Phase 5 rankings, but the MCU rankings, and that's Secret Invasion. Now, this is perhaps my hottest take of this list, and that's fine. Everyone has their own opinions. I think Secret Invasion, just regardless, outside of the MCU, irrespective of the MCU, just as an individual show, I think it's fine. I think what a lot of people are upset about are the more MCU connections of why is there a Super Skrull, Gaia, crazy overpowered character just running around in the MCU? Fair question. We may never see her again. What's going on with Rhodey? That one, I've always maintained that even if the original intention was to make Rhodey a Skrull from Civil War, they can easily retcon that. It's not like Rhodey came out of that cell and was like, hey guys, it's been a while. I haven't seen you guys since, since the hospital in Civil War. Remember that, guys? No, he didn't say anything like that. He was wearing a hospital gown. And yes, it was probably intended for that to be the case, but you can so easily retcon that to say he was in the hospital after Endgame, he had injuries. That's fine. And I think that makes some sense actually for that character. It's fine. I think the ending of Secret Invasion was a little bit weird. Yeah, I mean, I think that and then just the declaration of everything going on with the president and being like, yeah, we're not gonna, no more aliens, it had political undertones and some of the things in the show were interesting. I think Nick Fury was interesting in the show, for sure. I think a lot of the things in the character, I think that a lot of the way that the show was presented was pretty grounded, actually, and pretty interesting. I think Secret Invasion, irrespective of everything else in the MCU, is fine. That's my take. So we can talk a lot more about Secret Invasion another time, but that is what I think about that show. Coming in at number 9, spoilers ahead, is Ironheart. If you don't want to hear more about Ironheart, skip ahead about 30 seconds or a minute. But I think Ironheart, like I just said in my spoiler discussion for episodes 4 through 6, is a sketch of a really good show. Meaning that I think a lot of the great ideas of the show were outlined and were there, but not fleshed out nearly well enough. And I think that that's a problem. It doesn't make for a great show in itself. But I can't deny that everything, and this, spoiler warning if you're still listening, but Mephisto, right? I think that all that stuff was really interesting, really well done. But I don't know. I mean, a lot of the stuff just kind of felt half-baked to me. It's a bummer because I think this could have been a really good 10 to 12 episode show, and 6 episodes was just not nearly enough. So number 9 is Ironheart. Coming in at number 8 is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Another movie that some people really hate and I think is just fine. I think it is totally fine. Is it my favorite thing in the MCU that, the MCU has ever done? No, absolutely not. I think, though, it is entertaining enough. It's maybe not the greatest thing, but it is just fine. And that's about all I'm going to say about that. It's just fine to me, and it's entertaining enough. Coming in at number 7 is Captain America: Brave New World. Another movie that I think, on balance, is fine, with some interesting parts to it, but also some parts to it that, unlike Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, I'm like, that's not great. I think that the character arc of the leader is not really well done in this movie, versus in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I think Kang is, regardless of everything that went on with Jonathan Majors, I think that Kang was a very intimidating villain in that movie. I think Red Hulk stuff was pretty good. I think Harrison Ford did a great job. I think that it just felt like a kind of sloppily put together movie, which makes sense, the reshoots and all that kind of stuff. So, but I think overall I enjoy the tone and the feel of Captain America: Brave New World more than I do Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. But both movies to me are just very flawed but enjoyable movies, in my opinion. And yeah, I think they're fine. Coming in at number 6 is Agatha All Along. So this is a show that I think it's interesting because I really was not on board with the show for about the first 6 episodes. If you go and watch the all of my individual spoiler discussions for Agatha All Along, right about episode 5 or 6, I was like, I don't know about this. I personally am not a big fan of the individual episodes being a witch's trial because I just wasn't interested in the witch's trial. The witch's road, rather. I just wasn't interested in that. I will say the last 2 episodes really made the show work. The twists at the end with the witch's road and what was going on there, I thought that was fantastic what they were doing there. And I really, really, really enjoyed that. So it was able to turn itself around. But overall, I think it was good on balance, especially given the ending. But I don't think it was nearly as good as I hoped it was going to be. So Agatha All Along. Coming in at number 5 is Daredevil Born Again. To me, and this is after now having rewatched the first 2 seasons of Daredevil, and everyone says Daredevil Season 3 is the best one. I haven't seen it in a long time, so I don't remember how well it stacks up to the first 2. But I think, I'm going to wager that this is going to be my least favorite season of Daredevil. It's messy. It's very messy. And you can tell that this show was kind of gutted and re-put together. But unlike a movie like Captain America Brave New World, what they put back together, individual scenes and moments and story arcs, are very compelling and very interesting and set up what I think could be one of the best seasons of television in the Marvel canon with Daredevil Born Again Season 2. I am very, very excited about that. So I think Season 1 had a lot of the elements that it needed to be there, and I think they did what they could to stitch it back together, but I don't think that it got all the way there, but still really, really solid. Coming in at number 4 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, another movie that I think was really good, really well made. I've always said, though, that the Guardians were just not for me, not in the sense of I didn't like any of the Guardians films. I just never, when I was ranking, every single time I would rank the MCU, the Guardians films would never appear at the top of my list. And I kind of wondered why. And I just think that some of James Gunn's sensibilities don't click with me 100% of the way. I really like the first Guardians. I think Guardians 2 is actually kind of underrated. But never do I put them in the conversation of the best MCU films of all time, even though I know some people really think that the first Guardians is one of the best MCU movies ever made. And I love that. I really celebrate that. And I think Guardians 3 is very similar. All 3 of those films are very close to me in quality. I think 3 might be my favorite, or maybe 1. I think it's 1, 3, and 2. But I think that this film did such a good job of exploring Rocket's backstory. And I think that the emotion was there. And I think that the humor and all that, it was all there. So really enjoyed Guardians 3. Coming in at number 3, speaking of enjoying, is Deadpool and Wolverine, a film that was kind of billed as, it's going to be super emotional and whatnot, and in addition to the comedy. And I don't know, maybe, but I think that the comedy was there. This is one of the most entertaining movies in the MCU. I would put it up there, not in the same level as Thor Ragnarok, but in terms of entertainment wise. Definitely. Like, if you want to just put on an MCU movie and have a good time, this movie, Thor Ragnarok, they're up there. The first couple Ant-Man movies, these are just, it's such a good time. Such a good time. Coming in at number 2 is Loki Season 2. I think that, I've said this before though, Loki Season 2, it's hard for me to look at it separately from Loki Season 1 because I am still to this day baffled as to why they had to split those 2 seasons up. It is clearly one 12-episode season of television to me. And it's just weird. I don't get it because literally the very first scene at the beginning of Loki Season 2 is right after the end of Loki Season 1. You could have just made this one season. That being said, this season as a whole felt more conclusive. It felt more, it felt like it knew what the story was going to be. It knew the story was gonna tell. And I love the arc for Loki as a character all the way from when he first entered the TVA. I mean, honestly, through the first Avengers, then entering the TVA to where he ends up as the God of Stories, Loki. Really, really, really well done. Coming in at number 1, though, a pleasant surprise, although I had been saying for a while that I thought Thunderbolts was going to be good, is Thunderbolts. I cannot believe how much I enjoyed Thunderbolts. Is it a perfect movie in my opinion? No. Is it even up there, with the best of the MCU? I don't think so. Like the best of the best, I mean, like your Captain America Civil Wars or Infinity Wars or Endgames or Black Panthers. No, I don't think so. I think the second act in particular is especially, it feels lackluster in comparison to the first and third acts of the movie, but the ending is perhaps one of my favorite endings of any MCU movie. Not just like the last scene of the new Avengers or anything, but like the actual climax, the ending of the resolution of everyone pulling Bob off of the void. And I think that all of that stuff resonated and it was really, really great. So I will put Thunderbolts as my favorite project in the MCU Phase 5, which, look, as we look back on this list really quickly before we end this segment, I'm telling you, like, in my opinion, I get that there are some duds here, and I get that on balance, yeah, this is definitely the weakest phase in the MCU. No doubt, to me, in my mind. I don't think it's as bad as people think it is. Again, I don't think it's the best. I think that there are some projects here that I'm like, whoa, I don't know how we got there. There are some moments, at least, in different projects. But, I mean, Phase 5 has its moments. And I'm not just saying that this is somebody who's a quote-unquote homer for the MCU or whatever. I'm an eternal optimist, I think, in this regard. Like, if you've been watching my DCEU rewatch, you'll know that I enjoy most of the DCEU canon to some extent. And, there are things I don't enjoy. But, like, I'm not somebody who hates projects, right? Like, even my least favorite project in the DCU is probably Birds of Prey. And I don't hate Birds of Prey. I just don't like it that much. But, aside from that, I really don't hate any project in the DCEU either. So, I think for me, it's the eternal optimist in me. But I do enjoy parts and moments of a lot of these different shows and movies. So here's hoping that Phase 6, now that we've officially exited the Bob Chapek, put out as much content as possible era, and we have Fantastic Four, we have Wonder Man, Vision, Avengers Doomsday, Spider-Man 4, I'm hoping Phase 6 is really going to be up there in quality with the rest of the Infinity Saga, the earlier phases of the MCU. So guys, let me know in the comments down below what your own personal ranking of Phase 5 is. Let me know what that would be, and what some of your favorite and maybe least favorite projects in the MCU Phase 5 would be. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, this is the final episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Not forever, obviously, but the final episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod before Superman. By the time you listen to next week's episode, we will have a review of the first DCU film, Superman. And because of that, to celebrate that and to anticipate it, to look forward to it, we are doing our usual segment before all the big movies and shows, discussing my hopes and predictions for Superman. So this segment, like I just said, is going to contain some of the things I hope will happen in Superman. These things aren't guaranteed metrics of success in my eyes, but they are things in which if Superman is able to hit on all these things, I believe in my eyes Superman has a huge chance of success, at least for me personally, because obviously your criteria and things that you're hoping for might be different. Obviously, we always say on this channel, go into it with an open mind. So, I'm willing to see whatever James Gunn has concocted for us. But I think personally, if based on what I've seen in the trailers and what I've been told about this movie and what we've seen, that if Superman is able to hit on these things, then I think it will be a really, really good time. And my predictions are more separate from that, just some things that I think will happen based on rumors, speculations, and even some leaks and things like that. And just things that would be fun. I don't want to just predict random things like Superman saves someone. That's a prediction, but it's a boring prediction. So these predictions are going to be a little bit more out there, just like they always are, but hopefully still grounded in some form of reality. So with all of that being said, let's get into my 4 hopes here and 4 predictions. I like to always have an even number. I never make it the same number, just whatever comes to mind, but I always like to make them the same number. So anyways, 4 hopes and 4 predictions. Hope number 1. Fun, goofy, and silly are not inherently bad. They don't have to be bad. In fact, they can be quite good. But they don't always come across well. And so what I'm trying to say here in that little blurb is that there's nothing inherently wrong with being light, being fun, being goofy, being silly. In fact, I want to laugh. I want to enjoy myself. I want especially given what James Gunn has said about this movie, I want the feeling of this film to be almost euphoric in the sense of, triumphant, right? I want this movie to really be a reflection of the goodness of Superman and what this character really represents. All of that being said, if you guys have been following my coverage of this movie or just what I've been talking about on the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, on the Access Blockbusters Pod, there are a few things that I'm cautious about, right, in general. And one of the things is really tone. I'm excited about this movie. Don't get me wrong. I am. One thing that just hasn't grabbed me, and it just hasn't captivated me and gotten me as excited as it has other people, and that's totally great. I celebrate that a lot of people enjoy this, is the humor and just some of the things. I get that some people have waited years and years, and I don't mean this sarcastically at all. I get that some people have genuinely waited for Guy Gardner to look like that, to have the bowl cut and everything, and for Mr. Terrific and Hawkgirl and everything. That's great. To me, some of the costumes are a little too comic booky, little bit too much for me. The bowl cut, it's a little too much for me. I'm starting to get used to it, but even still, it's taking me a while. Crypto. Again, I've said this so many times so that nobody makes a mistake. Nobody mistakes me. I love dogs. But superhero space dog, I don't know. It's just not meshing for me. Some of the jokes that we've been seeing in the Superman trailers, the one at the end of the last trailer where he's like, no, I'm doing important things. It's not hitting for me. The one where we saw in the original, in one of the sneak peeks where the robot's like, oh my gosh, he looked at me. It's just not working. It's just not working for me personally, right? And that's okay. I just hope that, keep the tone light, be triumphant again, be optimistic, but don't straddle or don't go over the line. Rather, I was going to say straddle the fence, but don't go over the fence, and be just too goofy. And I know James Gunn, he likes to be a little irreverent, and I just hope that he can tone that down a little bit where he needs to, or appropriate, right? Because I want Superman to really be serious, not dark, right? Not necessarily Snyder serious, but really appropriate. When the moment calls for it, if that makes sense. We spent way too much time on the first point. Hope number two, rather. I would hope that Ultraman is not just throwaway and is a significant character. Reason being, it's not, because I have full confidence that Lex Luthor is going to be a very good character and obviously it's a Lex versus Superman story. What's going to make this movie, I think, that much better though, is if Ultraman, who seems like, the other main antagonist of the movie, is not just some goon, right? And it's fine if he is. It is fine if he is. But I think there is some intrigue here, whether he's a clone of Superman, whether he's some other, brainwashed superhero. I don't know what he could be. I think, though, there is something interesting there with this character. And I'd like to think that he's not just the Destroyer in Thor 1, and he's more of a Winter Soldier kind of character. And I think that would be super interesting, and it would help kind of round out the villains a little bit more in my eyes. Hope number 3. The center of the movie is Clark and Lois. I think that this is the one I am most optimistic about. I think that based on the trailers, based on the shots that they're deciding to show, the relationship between Clark and Lois seems very, very central to this movie. And I think it has to be. It doesn't have to be, but I think that if it is, that is really the beating heartbeat, the emotion of this movie. I'm not saying that Lois has to get captured and then Clark has to save her, we don't have to do that. I just mean that the reason we care about Clark Kent, about Superman, the titular character, is in large part due to Clark and Lois. And I think that, that having her be an anchor of the movie is going to be super, super important. So that is hope number 3. And hope number 4, and this might not be as popular for some of you guys who have been commenting, embrace the DCU. Don't just make this a complete standalone movie. Obviously, I'm not just talking about the characters that are going to be here with Supergirl and Hawkgirl and maybe Lobo, but also Mr. Terrific and Guy Gardner. I'm not just talking about that. Frank Grillo's Rick Flag Sr. I mean, just embrace the universe. You're setting up a universe, and let's live in this universe. You're going to see a couple predictions in here that I think allude to this, but I really hope that this movie is able to embrace that in full force. So I hope that, these 4 things, if they come to fruition, I think that will be a very, very interesting and fun ride. And then let's get to some predictions here for Superman. Number 1, I think Supergirl is going to have a pivotal role. Does that mean she's going to have 45 minutes of screen time? No, I don't think so. I think 10 minutes at most, but I do think that Millie Alcock Supergirl is going to have a pretty significant role in whatever the conflict is, and I think that she's going to be a big part of resolving it as well. We'll see. I could be totally wrong, but I think I have a prediction, or I have a good feeling about that one. Prediction number 2, we are going to take a trip to Gotham. Now, I don't think, I stopped short of saying we're going to see Batman. I just don't think they have the casting ready or ready to announce. That's fine. They don't need to right now. I do think, though, that in line with expanding this universe, I think a lot of these predictions are in line with that. I think Gotham is also across the bay, just like it was in the Snyderverse, right? Or the DCEU. And I think that, I'd like to see Clark Kent or even Superman just explore the surrounding area, explore the universe he's in, explore the world. And I do think we're going to take a trip to Gotham City. It's just, I don't really have anything to back that up, but I think that is going to be the case. Maybe a setup for Clayface. Speaking of setups here, the Justice League, or the seeds for the Justice League are planted in this movie, but not just the Justice League, other teams as well. We're talking Teen Titans, maybe we're talking the Authority, and what this is all going to be setting up is a war between different factions. We already have the Justice Gang, right? But let's set up the Justice League, the Authority, Teen Titans, whatever, Lex Luthor, the League of Villains, or the whatever they're called, I forget. But, I think that part of this, what this universe is going to do, is set up a bunch of different teams, creature commandos, and have them all face off against one another, or, I don't know, there's going to be some kind of war. I'm not saying Secret Wars kind of thing, Battle World, but, I think something interesting is going to happen based on all these different groups that are being formed. And I'm very curious. Maybe even Peacemaker's crew is a separate group, so we will see about that. And number 4, I think the post-credit scene will tease Lex Luthor's grand plans for the rest of the DCU. We know from comments from James Gunn that Lex Luthor will have a role to play in the future of the DCU. We also know that James Gunn said the post-credit scene will not just be arbitrarily teasing future other projects that are not part of Superman or related to Superman anyway. And so I think that a part of that is going to be, let's just keep it very focused on Superman, whatever happens in Superman. And I think that part of that is going to be teasing out Lex Luthor's plans for the future. So those are my 4 predictions. Those are my 4 hopes for Superman. Guys, I remain very optimistic and very excited about the potential of this movie. Like I've been saying for a while now, it just hasn't gotten me there to the point where I'm just over the moon excited about it. I think there are just enough things where I'm a little bit hesitant about, but still, I think that this movie is going to be pivotal no matter what, and I think that it's going to be very, very exciting, and I can't wait to be in the theater in about a week and watching Superman. I can't believe we're saying that, but we're here. We made it, guys. So, what do you think about Superman? What are your hopes, and what are some of your predictions for the film? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, let's dive into one of the biggest movies of the summer, I think, at least, in terms of box office, but I definitely know in terms of pop culture imprint. Let's talk about Jurassic World Rebirth. This is going to be a non-spoiler and spoiler review, so we'll talk about the non-spoilery side at first, and then we will dive in. I will be very clear about the spoiler section, and if you haven't seen it, you can feel free to skip ahead if you're listening to the entire podcast, or if you're listening to this segment, just make sure to save it for later and come back once you have seen the film if you care about spoilers. And I will be very clear once we start the spoiler section. But first, let's dive into the non-spoiler section of Jurassic World Rebirth. So, Jurassic World Rebirth. This is the 3rd iteration, I want to say, of the Jurassic Park franchise. Obviously, you had the first 3, Jurassic Park The Lost World, and then Jurassic Park 3. And then they did a soft reboot with Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard with Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and Jurassic World Dominion was attempting to tie everything together by bringing back the original cast. They're all set in the same universe, right? They're all referencing one another, but, it was clear that Jurassic World was an attempt to, just sort of restart the cycle for the franchise in 2015, I think it was. And this is Jurassic World Rebirth is still using the same Jurassic, World moniker, but it is really the 3rd iteration of this franchise, starring Scarlett Johansson, Mahershala Ali, and Jonathan Bailey as your main actors here. And, for those of you who have seen the trailers, you might have an idea of what the plot is, but like I said, in the name of not giving away anything, just in case you haven't, in case you don't want to know anything, we're not going to really talk about the actual plot of the movie here. And, honestly, what I will say about that is, one of the things that I was thinking about going into Jurassic World Rebirth, I keep wanting to call it Dominion, by the way, I don't know why, Jurassic World Rebirth, is that, these movies have a sort of floor to them in the sense of they're gonna be entertaining enough just based on how they make these movies now with the action and the visuals and whatnot. And if the plot is just flimsy and it doesn't really work, then so be it, was my thought going into the movie. Because, I feel like while I would love the next, Oscar-winning movie to be Jurassic World Rebirth, I don't think we expect that, really, based on the story and based on the characterizations and whatnot. I think we mostly go to these movies to have a good time and to enjoy ourselves. And I think that's fine. That's totally fine. And so that my thought going into the movie was, let's just have a good time. Here's what I'll say, though. The first 30 minutes or so of this movie, I was a little worried because even that low-ish bar, I was like, this movie may not clear that bar. The first 30 minutes of this movie are very shaky, in my opinion. And they do a couple things in the first 30 minutes. First of all, I think the writing sharpens up a little bit as we go throughout the movie. The writing in general is not, it's not the best script I've ever, seen put to screen or anything like that. It is what it is. I think some of the lines and some of the backstory and exposition that are delivered in such short and quick spurts in random scenes just feels very ham-fisted, especially towards the beginning. And I was like, okay, like I get it. You're not, this isn't. I'm not expecting the next Aaron Sorkin drama, but still, this is a little bit on the nose, don't you think? And I do a couple other things. If you've seen the movie, you'll probably know what I'm referring to. That made me go, uh-oh. Is that really where we're going? Is this something that we're doing here? And luckily, I was a little bit, I tried to remain patient with it because there are, it gets better as the movie goes on. But there are a few things that they set up at the beginning of this movie that I'm like, really? Are we really doing that? So the first 30 minutes or so, maybe 20 to 30 minutes, I was like, this is not looking good, because for a Jurassic World, Jurassic Park movie, again, it's a very low bar to clear, in my opinion. Just be entertaining, just be fun, and have a decent enough story. And so I was getting worried. I will say, though, there are a couple things that start to happen as we get into the end of the first act and towards the beginning of the second act that made me go, okay, I'm on board. And as the movie progresses, I think the pacing tightens up, and some of the decisions that they make don't always work. Some of the things that they're setting up don't always pay off in the most satisfying ways, and don't always work in the ways that I think they were intending to. However, I will say that by the time the movie ends, you see where everything lined up, you see how everything came together, and you're like, you know what? I see it, and I enjoyed it. I had fun. I really did have fun with Jurassic World Rebirth. Is it a perfect movie? No, of course not. There are things throughout this movie that made me go, what? What's going on here? Or why is this happening? Or what's the point of this? Or why is this character doing that? Or what is this character even doing in the movie at all? But as the movie goes on and tries to tie things together, you're kind of like, oh, I kind of get it now. Action in this movie is great. It is some of the more tense, scary dinosaur action you've seen in the recent Jurassic Park movies, Jurassic World movies. That is one of the things that we talked about in the original reactions, or the first reactions to Jurassic World Rebirth, where people were like, this is, the action's great. It's almost like horror, kind of thing, where the dinosaurs are very scary. And I can definitely attest to that. The dinosaurs are scary again. And I think that's good because, in the last movie, Dominion, they were just kind of running around everywhere, and they're on Earth, or they're all over the planet just kind of running around. And it was like, okay, yeah, sure. But in this movie, they're quite scary. Again, like I said, the setup, how they got there, how they're even confronting dinosaurs in the first place, a bit flimsy, and some of the character things that they're trying to set up here don't pay off in the most interesting ways, to be quite honest with you. But I will say that every time there is something going on with the dinosaurs, you're locked in. I was locked in to what was happening here. Performances-wise, you get charismatic actors like Jonathan Bailey, Scarlett Johansson, and Mahershala Ali, who, again, I think that some of the dialogue that they were given early on and the setup was very shaky, but once the characters kind of settle into the movie, you're like, oh, okay, yep, that's why you cast these actors, because they're great, and they're super fun, and they're charismatic, and so you really, really enjoy them. And I think that they all did a very good job, especially towards the end. I will say that the ending set piece was quite good. There were a lot of things going on, but it never felt too chaotic. It felt like everything was happening kind of logically. Like you were like, oh yeah, like because this thing is happening over here, and then this thing is happening over here, and then twists and turns and whatnot. And I was entertained by the ending as well. And I will say as well, there are a couple scenes in the movie that I was like, wow, that actually got me. Not emotionally or anything like that. I wasn't like breaking down in tears or anything. But there are a couple scenes in the middle, especially, where I was just sitting there and I was going, that felt like Jurassic Park. That was, wow, that was great. So the movie really has its moments to shine. And then every once in a while, they'll kind of cut back to something, or they'll jump to something, and you're like, do we really need this? And then they'll do something else that you're like, yeah, but that was pretty cool. And I think that's really a lot of what this movie is, I think that, like I said, it definitely gets better as the movie goes along. And you're kind of thinking, it's this back and forth that you're going through with yourself, at least for me, where I was thinking constantly just kind of going back and forth of, do we really need to be doing this? But also that was kind of cool. And as the movie progresses, you're starting to lean more towards that was pretty cool. And again, by the time they end the movie, I sat back in my chair and was like, that was pretty cool. It's, again, the plot is not the sturdiest thing ever. The way that they set it up, you're like, oh, really? That's it. And then you just kind of go and you're like, I guess that's it. There are some characters that are comical. I don't know if they were intended to be like that. There are some characters that make you wonder why they're there. And then you're like, well, I guess they served a purpose. But again, I think that this movie, it serves the purpose of being a Jurassic World movie that has a little bit more, because I do think that while there is a lower bar for these kinds of movies, we've seen it before. We just saw it with Jurassic World Dominion. That movie to me did not clear the bar. Those action scenes, sure, were entertaining. I thought the rest of the movie was terrible. It was just so flat and uninteresting and convoluted. And Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, while not as bad in my opinion, was still in that same boat of, really? This is what we're doing? And this movie has some of those moments of, really? This is what we're doing? But the movie tries to tell you, hey, just hold on here. We're going to take you for a ride and just enjoy it. And I found myself going along with it and being patient and being like, yeah, that makes sense. I kind of get why you did that. So overall, I would say I would recommend Jurassic World Rebirth if you enjoy the Jurassic Park franchise. I can't, promise you're going to love the movie, especially if you're a big fan of the originals. I love the original Jurassic Park. It's obvious, I hope it's obvious by the review. It's nowhere close to the original. I would say though, it pretty much is the next best thing, I think, in terms of what we've gotten in recent years. Like, I think it's easily better than obviously Dominion and Fallen Kingdom. And I would say it's pretty comfortably better than the first Jurassic World, though I do enjoy the first Jurassic World for what it is. So I'm, honestly, if that's the criteria for this, I'm pretty happy with what we got, and I enjoyed it. I will say, like I said, if you, if there are parts at the beginning where you're like, uh-oh, this doesn't look good, I would recommend just stick with it. And at the very worst, the action with the dinosaurs, they're terrifying. And, the different kinds of dinosaurs that you see are very interesting. Stick with it, and I think you'll have a good time with the movie. So guys, those are my non-spoiler thoughts for Jurassic World Rebirth. But now we'll dive a little bit into spoilers before we sign off for this segment. And if you haven't seen the movie, I'm just giving you a couple seconds to skip ahead or save the segment for later. Log off if you need to. And let's get into the spoilers for Jurassic World Rebirth. So obviously, if you've seen the movie during and you were listening to the non-spoiler section of the movie or this review, you probably know exactly what I was talking about. It's the family subplot with the boyfriend. And when we first get there, I mean, first of all, like I was saying, the beginning, the exposition of, this is Dr. Henry, and this is Zora, and and I was like, okay. And then later on the boat, there's 2 minutes of exposition where Zora, Scarlett Johansson, and Duncan, Mahershala Ali, are just spitting exposition back at each other, and then they just move on. I was like, oh, okay, that was it. And on top of that, then we have this family subplot, which when they first cut to it, and I realized what was going on, because I kind of thought, is this just a rescue thing that's just, that's going to go away after a little bit? I was concerned, especially with Xavier. When he popped out of the boat, and I was like, are we really going there? Are we really just going to have a character be like this for the entire movie? And when the scene kept going and going and going, they had the introduction scene with them on the boat was 10, 15 minutes long. And I was like, oh no. Not because, I'm inherently against anything. I get the concept of having non-main characters or quote unquote civilian characters be in dangers to kind of raise stakes and stuff. I get that. The other films have tried this though, and it usually doesn't work super well. And so when they started to do this, I was like, oh man, like this isn't what I was hoping for. Spending a really extended amount of time with these characters. I will say though, when they interact with the main cast, when they finally get rescued, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Actually, there's some tension here. There's some things going on, and then they get split up again, and I was like, are we really gonna have an entire subplot again with these characters just running around in the jungle for no reason? And look, let's be honest, right? This movie didn't need that. This movie really didn't need it at all because it kept cutting back to them in the jungle. I will say though, going back to that idea of, did we really need that? But that was pretty cool. It led to some really good action sequences. That T-Rex scene in the river, that was awesome. Super tense. And that poor little girl, by the way, just traumatized by the entire movie. I felt really bad for her the entire movie. Bella was her name. But, I think that just the way that they framed the T-Rex and the dinosaurs, I think all of that was really, really well done. And so by the time they actually come back together again at the facility, I found myself being a lot more on board with this family. Because if you take a look back at it, the only reason they're in this movie is to just have other people who are, you can root for. You're rooting for Scarlett Johansson, Mahershala Ali, Jonathan Bailey, but root for in a sense of these are normal people, right? Scarlett, you know what I mean? These are people who, like you and me, who just got caught up in this adventure. And while I would have maybe preferred if they weren't completely split up from the A storyline, if you will, I enjoyed it for what it was. And the ending was great when they're running around and they're all together. And I think that, it just worked. It really worked. The scene also I was referring to earlier where I felt that Jurassic Parkness of it all was what they called Titanosauruses or whatever, where that was the one scene where they let the John Williams score blast and they just blared it. And I know it's sort of a shorthand, it's cheating in a way. You could blast that theme against any backdrop that's remotely pretty and I'd be like, yeah, wow, that's amazing. But I think what that scene represented, if you noticed, nobody really talked in that scene except for Jonathan Bailey just cheering, and it's beautiful. It was really great. It just kind of showed you what the wonder of this universe and what the wonder of this franchise really can be, right? That's when they step out of the vehicle in the first movie and see those dinosaurs and the music starts playing. That's what this is about. That's what this franchise is about. Is that, danger for sure, like running around the park and whatnot, but also wonder. And I think that's what that scene captured super well. And honestly, aside from that, I thought Mahershala Ali was gonna die. And I was happy to see him come back. I thought that he would have had a pretty fitting send off, a sacrifice, which would, was worthy of his character. But happy to see him come back as well. I don't know if they're gonna make a sequel to this movie. I kind of hope so, because look, again, I mean, is it a perfect movie? No. Like I said, I thought the first 30 minutes were not my favorite, and I still think a lot of the subplots that they're doing with the family, especially, you look back on it and you're like, well, did we really need to do that though? But I think that the action was great, the visuals were great, the tension was great. The other thing, I guess, to add on to that is that the whole video game setup of we need to collect these 3 different things from these 3 different dinosaurs, and I was like, oh, okay, is that really the entire setup for this movie? It's very simple, but to their credit, they make it work, and they know that they're not here to make the most complex story of all time, and they're here just to run around and be chased by dinosaurs. And I think that they being the crew and the director and the writers did a good enough job with that. And so I was very happy walking into this movie, and I would like to see another one with these characters. I think it would be pretty fun. I don't know about the family. I don't know in what world they come back for a sequel, but with the main 3, Jonathan Bailey, Scarlett Johansson, and Mahershala Ali would be pretty fun. So guys, what did you think of Jurassic World Rebirth? Have you seen it, and did you enjoy it? Or maybe you didn't, and maybe you thought it was the worst one, maybe you thought it was the best one out of all of them. Let me know in the comments down below. And everyone, that will do it for episode number 85 of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us. Like I said, it's going to be a wild ride as we head through this month, so really excited to embark on that journey with you guys. Make sure to subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, even if you're listening on audio, but of course, if you're listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube, it would mean so much to me. We are so close. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers by 2026, so it would be just a huge celebration for all of us, I think, if we could get there. And if you're listening on the audio-only platforms, Spotify, Overcast, and Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating, and let me know what you think about the audio-only format as well. That will do it from me for episode number 85 of the Access Blockbusters Pod, and I will see you guys in the next one.